Hello, everyone. Paul Elam here again with part two of Defeating Feminism. I was talking about what's happening with the internet and men's rights activism over the past couple of years. And I mentioned that men are angry now, had posted some statistics that were very telling about what's going on. It goes something like this. In 2007, if you did a Google search on both men's and women's rights, you would have gotten back the following results. Women's rights, 4,270,000 hits. Men's rights, 511,000 hits. Exactly 2 years later, you can do the same search with these results. Women's rights, 48,300,000 hits. Men's rights, 70,600,000 hits. In other words, we went from lagging by a long way to a very substantial lead in 2 years flat. Now, you may wonder why the internet matters considering the feminist influence in the mainstream media. Well, let me tell you, it matters very much. Some elements of the mainstream media, largely as a result of the internet, are on the decline. Print media is clamoring against ever-narrowing profit margins, cutting costs as much as possible, but still falling behind the curve. Cable and network news outlets have been forced to integrate the internet into standard operations to reach the increasingly valued demographic of consumers who blend traditional and online sources for news. Political discussion forums and online campaigning are growing astronomically. Even political fledglings are using social networking sites like Facebook to launch their ambitions. It all points in the same direction. The internet is the mainstream media of the future, and its nature doesn't allow the traditional gags to be placed on alternative voices. In other words, in the online world, when the media talks, we get to talk back. And that fact makes it impossible to ignore any group with sufficient numbers and the will to voice their ideas. MRAs have the drive and the will, and the exponentially growing numbers. We are literally changing the way people think each and every day, and feminists are hardly in a place anymore to stand in the way. Their dominance in so many areas has been so long taken for granted, standard operating procedure, if you will. But it is highly vulnerable for a variety of reasons. After an entire generation of debunked assertions, bad science, and overtly sexist propaganda, their legacy of lies is finally making its karmic return to the source. You see, keeping a grip on power at some point hinges on having a grip on reality. Failing at this, modern feminism has become a paper tiger, caged in its own hypocrisy, subsisting on a diet of delusion and hubris, which is another way of saying they're eating their own excrement. A once almost unassailable socio-political fortress, the gynocracy is now gimcrack and on its way to rubble, and feminism's no longer a sustainable movement, but just a profoundly neurotic hitch in social evolution that is in the early stages of being corrected. Going through demographic information provided by sites like Alexa.com and others, you get a pretty clear picture of average people keeping abreast of gender issues. When you compare feminist websites like feministing.com to sites like mensnewsdaily.com, it paints a pretty embarrassing contrast for feminists, well, assuming that feminists can be embarrassed. Their demographics, particularly in education, look to be drawn from some mosh pit in an urban hellhole. You see, intelligent, informed people seldom stay with shaky logic and false premises. That's one of the reasons that feminism has been losing so many from its ranks over the years. And as feminism continues to exceed the average life expectancy of bad ideas, those that cling to it are often the only ones dumbed down enough for the job, or those so hopelessly brainwashed that they no longer can tell reality apart from deified victimhood. So while men's rights activism is on a steamroll and will soon be barreling like a locomotive right at the feminist power structure, the gatekeepers won't mount much of a defense. The worm has already turned. Consciousness of the truth is already being instilled into the culture on a growing scale, and truth is the ultimately terminal blow at any bogus ideology. We won't know all this is happening from picketing, shrill demonstrations, or flaming effigies on the streets. There won't be a trumpet call or a celebratory parade. We can simply see that the tide is turning each time a court inflicts justice on the tainted domestic violence industry. Our evidence will be in the demise, one by one, of rape shield laws, the prosecution of paternity fraud, and lying for the purpose of a restraining order, or crying rape when sex was consensual just to cover guilt, or simply to cover your ass with somebody you cheated on. We will witness it in the eventual end of Title IV funding to corrupt family courts and the enforcement of shared parenting. The groundwork, and more importantly, the consciousness for all this is being laid out as we live and breathe. This movement will find its way into social circles where statements like "boys are stupid, throw rocks at them" are met with stone-cold glares and the righteous indignation they deserve. And we will know how real it all is when we hear the increased wailing of feminists who claim MRAs are about misogyny and denying equal rights, followed by the dull thud of it falling flat on ears that grow more and more weary of histrionics and crying wolf. Feminism will die from a synergistic overdose of stupidity, smugness, and sexism. And the men's rights agenda will prevail because it is one of justice and equality under the law. That agenda isn't just carried by those in the limelight. It is a groundswell of outrage that has been corked up for nearly half a century. It is legions of men and women who are finally waking up and deciding that enough is enough. We have reached the time that if you want to get a ride on the train, you'll have to get a move on for a good seat. But it'll be worth the effort. Or, as I recently read from another MRA, this train is the only one that knows where it's going. And I say, all aboard. Now, in the third and final part of this series, I'm going to lay out what you can do to help this thing along. And please know that your efforts do help. I mean, really help. The good news is that you can leave your wallet in your pocket. Nobody wants your money. If you have the equipment it takes to watch this video, you can become a viable force for change. You don't have to have any more computer skills than it takes to upload a YouTube video or make a comment on one of the threads. I'm going to show you exactly how to do it, and other than a few hours to get started, it takes very little of your time. I'll be back in a day or two with that video. In the meantime, thanks for listening, and see you next time.